Hello and welcome. So I wanted to take a little bit of time today to go over the process of buying a laundromat. I know in the first video I talked a little bit about it, at least what my process looked like, but I just wanted to go into a little bit more detail because people have been asking, and I know that there's a lot of interest out there. There's just not a lot of resources, and that's one of the reasons I created this channel, just so I could share what I'm learning about this process so that it can hopefully be helpful for others. There's a couple ways that I've seen people purchase laundromats, and the first one, there's this kind of especially popular on YouTube, but there's this idea of getting a laundromat for $0. And there's specialists who you can call who can do the negotiating for you and basically obtain the location of a laundromat for free, and then you go in with all of your new equipment and kind of turn the business around. Now, you're not getting anything for free. I mean, you're still purchasing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of brand new equipment, bottom line. So it's more, I don't want to call it a gimmick. It's, the initial negotiation, sure, is going to be $0 because a lot of times these places have, this rundown laundromat. Maybe it's part of a larger building and they're not collecting any rent on it. Because most laundromats are leased, which a lot of people didn't know. And they're not collecting any rent. And so they're happy to just give the space to somebody so that they can purchase new equipment, start generating revenue, and start paying rent to the people who own the buildings. And so that's one way to go about it. Another way is actually building out a new laundromat, which isn't very common anymore. The biggest reason being the amount of money you have to pay to the city or county in order to put in all of the additional plumbing and fixtures. So that cost can be astronomical, like upwards of $100,000 just to do the install. And you're talking about the price to pay the contractors to actually build it out. And then you're talking about the price of the equipment. And at that point, now you have to hope that all the debt that you've taken on can be supported by all of your revenue after your utility expenses. So I was sharing with some people online, in my case, I'm paying $1,500 in water, $2,000 in electricity, and over $2,000 in gas. So the expenses are high. It's a high revenue, high expense, typically low margin business. Now you can make good money if you manage it well, but in my case, the laundromat that I purchased wasn't managed very well. So it is possible to fail in this business. Finally, the route that I took was purchasing an existing cash flowing business. And so I was not on the market for a laundromat when I first purchased, when this first came to my attention. I was trying to buy a multi-unit rental property, as I own various rental properties right now. And that's my main source of passive income. That particular deal fell through, and I was on the market for another one. And one of the places where I typically look to find multifamily deals is either LoopNet or BizBuySell. Both those websites you can check out. I'll put the links in the description. But think of it as Zillow for businesses. And a lot of times you'll get, if anything, you'll just get leads to what businesses are for sale and who the broker is or the seller that you can contact in order to get more information. And so when I saw that the laundromat that I purchased was listed, I ran the numbers. They posted really what ended up being inflated revenue numbers. But it was enough to get my attention. And I thought, well, okay, if they're lying, I'm going to find out. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But if they're not lying and it's anywhere close to these numbers, then this is a phenomenal deal. Because according to them, the business was making $100,000 in profit 3 or 4 years ago, currently down to about $70,000 in profit, and they were only listed for $225,000, and I already had a down payment from my deal that fell through. So to me, I thought this is immediately worth a call. I called the broker completely honest too. I mean, that's one thing I would encourage. If you're getting into this business, you're going to do your research. I've been doing research for a year or two, but didn't mean I was in the market for one. I just eventually maybe wanted to buy a laundromat, but I knew enough about where to look in order to say, what should the valuation be based on the monthly income, and et cetera, et cetera. What should I ask for as far as the due diligence, that kind of thing. So I called and yeah, sure enough, I was just honest with the guy, and I just said, listen, I'm going to need you to walk me through this. How do I get lending for this? I know how to get lending for residential property or commercial property. I don't know how to get lending for a business or for an asset purchase, which is what this ended up being. And he was happy to give me the connections, no judgment on his end. Like, he just wants this, his job is to sell the thing. And at the end of the day, as complicated as they make these deals, I want to buy your thing. I'm going to give you money for it, and you can either accept my offer or decline my offer. So when you really boil it down, that's all it is. And so he was happy to refer me to a local bank who specialized in small business loans. And those don't always get approved. Sometimes you have to go through other private funding sources. And there are funding sources specifically for laundromats. They're a little bit higher interest, but they're easier to obtain. So my hope was that I would be able to find a bank that would give me a small business loan. Otherwise, I also had a backup financing option in one of the many laundry lenders that are out there, which you can do your research. I can put a couple links down in the description for that as well. But always have a backup financing option. And in my case, I ended up obtaining the small business loan, thankfully, which had a 6-year term, which is good, and also had a 5.6% interest rate, which is phenomenal. That's not necessarily something that you should shoot for. In my case, I collateralized a rental property that I own outright. I wouldn't be able to collateralize a rental property that I didn't own outright. So that's why I say, if you have a property that you own outright, great. You can collateralize that as long as it's a risk that you're, willing to take and that you've measured out. In my case, I'm buying a revenue generating business, and I have my primary work in IT is revenue generating. And so I'm not worried about losing this rental property, for example. But other people who are maybe buying a business that's not generating revenue, you might want to think twice about that. But in my case, it worked out. So I collateralized a rental property. And I should mention, the reason that you need to do that is because a bank will only ever lend you 50% of the price of the assets that you are purchasing. And so the way that my deal worked out, we allocated almost all of the price to the assets. And that's in the purchase contract, where you can allocate towards the assets, you can allocate towards goodwill, which I can go into a whole nother video about this, but that's basically if you're purchasing a business, and how do you attribute value to, for example, their customer base, things like that. And then I allocated some funds towards the non-compete. So that's also typical. And what that means is if he breaks our non-compete clause, then he owes me the amount that we allocated towards that. And the non-compete was basically, that he's not gonna set up a laundromat right next door to me. I think it said something like within 3 miles, but that's super dumbed down, even to the point of maybe being incorrect. I would love to go into more details on it. I'm just trying to be brief so I don't make a 1 hour long video on purchasing a laundromat. The most time consuming portion of the process is the due diligence. And what that means is, as with any business, you have to know everything about that business end to end, like without leaving anything up to trust, basically. You have to do what you can to make sure that the business that you're purchasing is legit. The numbers that you get from them is, try as they might, as honest as they might be, they're not going to be right. So what that included for me was I obtained 3 years of tax returns for the business, along with profit and loss statements, along with bank statements, where I was able to cross-reference what their income was that they were reporting, all of their money that was coming in and out of the bank account, and just verify that the income and the profit was what I was looking for. Now, again, a number of things that I can go into in depth here, but the number one thing I'll tell you is hire a CPA that you trust. If you don't use one, find one. And it's worth it to, I scheduled a handful of meetings in order to understand myself, as well as have another set of eyes on the details of their accounting and their business and their taxes, and understanding, all of the depreciation and what their profits are on paper versus what their profits are in cash. So those things are very different. For example, if you're writing off $70,000 in equipment that you purchased and you're depreciating that in year one, that doesn't mean that you lose $70,000. That just means that you aren't paying taxes on those $70,000. And so when you report that to the IRS, that's going to look like your income is a lot lower than it actually was. And in a sense, you're depreciating it because you are accounting for the cost of having to replace that asset. And so it does need to be heated, but depreciation is the most powerful tax tool that you have in your arsenal. And when it comes to a laundromat, it's an entirely an equipment-based business. And so as soon as I purchase new equipment, for example, I'm going to be depreciating that year one. I'm going to be reducing my taxable income to effectively zero. And that's your whole goal, is what can I do legally to reduce my taxable income as much as possible. So that's another reason why you want to work with a CPA, to make sure that you understand the tax benefits or the tax planning that needs to go into place. So that covers the financial aspect of the due diligence that are even beyond my own knowledge of the subject. And that's why my other recommendation is hire an intelligent and experienced lawyer who knows what they're doing when it comes to business acquisitions, and be prepared to shell out a lot of cash. For me, that meant upwards of $10,000. That sounds like a lot, but here's the thing, is when you're purchasing a business like this, you don't want to mess it up just because you weren't willing to do your research and pay for expert opinions. I mean, unless you are an expert in business acquisitions, if you are, message me. I would love to learn from you. But unless you are an expert in business acquisitions, don't do this on your own. The other thing is, when you are purchasing something and you're excited about it and you really, really, really want it to work out, from my experience and from what I've heard from others, you will always, maybe unconsciously, but turn a blind eye to things. And your lawyer is absolutely not going to turn a blind eye to things. In fact, they will sometimes be the biggest pain in your ass, because they're going to be telling you, look, here, this is what I found. This is what it means. This is the risk that you are taking on. And my job is to make you aware of that risk. It's your job to say, yes, I want to move forward with it anyways. And there were so many times throughout this process that that came up, and I had to be like, well, that's a chance that I'm willing to take. Specifically with negotiating the lease. The lease that I signed is very landlord favorable and very unfavorable to me. I have to cover basically everything in this building. And I pay an exorbitant rent, and my lawyer hated every second of negotiating that lease because we were not able to get very many, if any, concessions on it. I did get a lock on the rent, which was huge for me. So it was previously going up 3% every year. And I was able to negotiate some repairs. For example, the HVAC, should it go out, that he would help with some of the costs of replacing it, which is probably would have been my largest expense, that I would have had to cover 100% of the HVAC in a building that I don't even own. So that was tough. And for some people, they maybe get, really lenient leases, but for a lot of people, they know laundromats make money. And so landlords will hit you hard. My lawyers tell me, don't sign this lease. And for me, that meant walking away from the deal. And in the end, after looking at the cash flow, and what I was able to manage, should anything catastrophic arise, it was a chance that I was willing to take. And that was his job. His job is to present me with all of the risks, and then it's my decision if I wanted to move forward with it. But in the end, what I'm trying to say is he was an excellent partner in this process, and definitely somebody that I would use again should I purchase another laundromat or any other kind of business. But I highly recommend that. And that's really just about building out your team. So my team consisted of the CPA, who I've used before, and the lawyer, even the banker, who they were obviously advocating for me, but working with them and making sure that they were informed, making sure that I was informed. That was my expectation, that I communicated clearly to them that whatever you send to my lawyer, whatever you send to the seller, whatever you send to anybody, I need to know about it. And they did a great job of keeping me informed and keeping me in the loops that I could make the important decisions that I needed to make throughout the process. So I think that's pretty much where I'll leave it for due diligence, and we're really actually coming into a close on this. After you do all of that, and your financing goes through, and you get a clear to close from the bank, well, now you own a laundromat. I negotiated into the contract a month of on-site support and phone support, which the guy has been going above and beyond, really. He's been very helpful with making sure that I know everything that I need to know about the business, and even taking care of, which this is probably not usual or probably not common, but he's even taking care of some repairs to the machines after the fact to make sure that I'm left with a laundromat that's running smoothly. And I've talked about it in some of the videos prior to this, but every single day you're going to have some kind of issue pop up, especially when you have, roughly, I think I have 55 machines in total. One of them's going to act up. I even have machines that are currently offline until further notice. And, these are the types of things that are common, I would say, from any laundromat that you purchase. So since then, I think I've pretty much covered what the day-to-day looks like after purchasing a laundromat, and I will continue to cover that. I'm really excited to be showing all of you the various updates that we're making, the process of starting a wash, dry, fold business from scratch. I have no idea what that's going to look like. I'm even just nervous thinking about, okay, so I'm going to be hiring people to be at this location, and am I even going to have anyone come drop off laundry? Like, I don't know how long it's going to be until I have people dropping off laundry, but I will go into details on how I'm going to be marketing it, what works and what doesn't, and yeah, I'm just excited about this. It's a business, but it's also it's a hobby. I get really excited about it. I'm excited to share it with all of you, and yeah, so thanks for sticking around and listening. Let me know if this was helpful, or if there was anything that you would like me to talk more about that I didn't go into detail on. And other than that, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.